Hey now, welcome to episode 8 of the Help Find the Others podcast. If you've been with us all along, welcome back. If this is your first time hearing this podcast, well then welcome. As I always do, I'd like to start with a quote. Tonight's quote comes from Mr. Tom Wolfe in his book, The Electric Kool-Aid Acid Test. Somebody has to be the pioneer and leave the marks for others to follow. You've got to have some faith in what you're trying to do. It's easy to have faith as long as it goes along with what you already know, but you've got to have faith in us all the way. So I picked that quote, one, because I'm currently reading that book for the second time, but also because it kind of, the book and the story about the merry pranksters in their bus further reminds me of my guest tonight. He sent me an email to talk about a venture that he has going on right now where he actually bought a bus. And he's having a psychedelic talk or like kind of a meeting group, which I'll let him talk about. But I'd like to introduce you guys to Tyson. How you doing there, man?
Good. How are you?
Good, man. Great to have you. And then, as always, Stan is on the line too. How you doing, man?
Good, man.
Awesome. So, yeah, Tyson, just kind of, tell us about your bus. What made you go out and do it, and just tell us a little story about what you've been doing.
Okay. So the buying the bus and starting the group were actually kind of two separate ventures. The bus came to me. I'd seen lots of YouTube videos of people building them and thought it was a cool idea, but it just wasn't. I didn't feel like I wanted to do it though. And then on a mushroom trip one night, actually on a Saturday night, the Saturday before Easter, it just kind of hit me that, okay, this is my next step, is what I need to do as far as what I want to do with my life is I want to travel and I want to have my whole life with me as I do it. And I immediately thought of this as just some childish dream that I had and put it out of my mind. There's no way I'm selling this to my wife. I'm just being ridiculous. I need to let this idea go. And the next day she sat me down and said, we need to talk. And I kind of like froze up for a second and I was like, all right, bracing for it. What is it? And she's like, I know this is insane and kind of out of nowhere, but I think I want to like quit our jobs and buy a bus. And in that exact moment, I knew, all right, this is what's happening. I just decided this is what's happening in our life. And yeah, a month and a half later, I was bringing home a bus, trying to figure out where I was going to park it. And yeah, that's kind of how it came about.
That's awesome. Now, was it running and everything?
Oh, yeah.
Or did you have to, repair it a lot or anything, or it's all good to go?
Nope, absolutely nothing at all. It was it's not a school bus. It's a Greyhound bus. It's a 40-foot Greyhound with the full storage bays underneath and everything. And 6 months before I bought it, it was an in-service Greyhound bus. So, I mean, the motors on these things are good for over 1 million miles, and it had 160,000 miles on it. And no, I mean, I brought it home. We took the seats out and immediately started taking it on trips. And then once we got the seats out and I tore out the overhead bins, we threw in some furniture and some air mattresses and just said, all right, let's go take some trips. And we went around in just short trips because it's expensive to drive that thing around. And we just went out camping to some local areas and just had the best time ever. And it just like, we could not believe how it was ours. And it was just anytime we wanted, it was just there to go and enjoy. And so then after last summer, when winter came, I took it all back apart and then just continued tearing it apart, took out the bathroom, the flooring. I mean, it tore it down to just the bare metal. And then, yeah, I just started building back up from there, basically.
Yeah, that's awesome. So then when did the whole, psychedelic conversation group come into play with it?
So, let's see. I was a part of a maker space here, which is basically, have you ever seen those game lobbies or whatever, where everyone can go and play Dungeons and Dragons or trade cards or whatever they want to do, and they meet up like once a week or whatever. It's like that, but for geeks, and we build electronics and have 3D printers and CNC machines there and can build whatever you want. So I'd been a part of that, and there was, and I joined that around the same time I got into psychedelics. And there was another member there that had also, I'd kind of just pulled it out of him that I'd kind of deduced that he was also into psychedelics. And me and him started talking about it. And then we met a third person because me and him were into electric bikes. And then we met somebody else out on an electric bike ride. And when we met him, he was riding around electric bikes with his dad, both on mushrooms. And it was his dad's first trip together. And it was just, they happened to be on electric bikes too. And it was just like they were put right in front of us, and we stopped and started talking. And then kind of went down from there. And it was another friend with me also that had started with the electric bikes. And we all kind of just had an interest in psychedelics, even though one of them hadn't even taken them. And so finally, I got tired of only having these talks like just once a week if they were going to be at the group and if I was going to get to talk about these things. And I wanted a consistent conversation to have about these. So I just said, look, I want to start having a meeting once a week on my bus. Like, we'll just sit around the fireplace and just discuss whatever comes up, both psychedelics, in their history of them, their use going into the future, what role you think they're going to play, and just whatever comes up. And they were completely on board with it. And we just kind of went from there. Every Thursday we meet up and just have discussions. They bring new people, friends that they know, and just we have some of the greatest discussions, hear some of the greatest stories from people that show up. And just, yeah, it's just been just a great experience. And it only seemed fitting that when I got the bus, the moment we got it, I knew I was going to name it The Other Ship. And it just seemed fitting that a year and a half later, I started a group, and I was like, well, it obviously needs to be named The Others.
Yeah. That's just crazy. And that was the other thing when you emailed me and said about that. I'm like, holy shit. Okay, well, he's supposed to be on the podcast, like I definitely.
So yeah, if anyone wants to follow along or anything, at least with if you want to contact me about interest in the psychedelics group or join up or anything, you can reach me at theothersspokane@gmail.com, and Spokane is Spokne. And then or if you want to follow along with the bus and our travels and just me building the bus, because we're still in the process, it's Othership Adventures on Instagram.
Yeah, no, that's great, man. I can't wait to see where it goes, because and much like the book I referenced at the start. Now you said you didn't. Someone had told you about it. You didn't know about the Merry Pranksters when you started the group, right?
No, it wasn't until we'd had it probably 6 to 8 months, something like that, and I was at basically a concert, and someone was asking about my bus, and I was telling him about it, or somehow it came up, and he was like, oh, so you're going to be like the Merry Pranksters. And I was like, I've heard that name, but I don't quite know what it is. And he's like, what, really? So I went, and if anybody else who doesn't know what they are wants to see, there's a great documentary on, I believe it's on Netflix. You can put in the Merry Pranksters, and it's also on YouTube as well. And just, it's a documentary of them and what they did. And yeah, it just seemed so fitting. And it would be great to do that, other than that they did it in a time when it was legal to do. So not quite the plans I have with it, more traveling around with my wife, but yeah, it's a interesting coincidence, I guess.
Well, and honestly, what you're doing with it and having a discussion group in it, and even if you do end up down the road, it becomes a traveling venture. It's still being more discussion based and responsible, and you guys aren't covered in day glow paint and doing all these things. I mean, it's just more it's more fitting with the time. It's more fitting with this wave of the psychedelic revolution.
Exactly.
The Merry Pranksters and Timothy Leary, their part of the psychedelic revolution was everyone should go crazy, just do what you want, and everyone should be taking LSD, and everyone should be dropping out of society and life and all of this and whatever. And I think what we've seen over the last, 50, 60 years or however long it's been since they were doing their thing is that that didn't help the negative stigma of society's view of psychedelics. That in fact made it worse and shoved everything underground. So I think, us that are the others now that are carrying on the torch, we can't be crazy and covered in day glow paint and seem so far out there that none of the straight world can relate to us. We have to be responsible adults about all of this and have it be yes, it's okay to have the exploration with these substances and stuff like that, but it has to come from a adult discussion based kind of research kind of and so that's you're almost creating further too. That
was definitely something that I think that the first psychedelics revolution, one of the mistakes of what made a revolution out of what could have been an evolution was the hubris of it, that they were so, we're right, love will always win, and really, I think that's something we're undoing is we're having a little bit more tact for it, and it was kind of a result of the oppression of the 50s and how the nuclear family and how uptight everything was supposed to be, and so everything exploded in the 60s, and there was this just this massive level of hubris where there wasn't a lot of tact to it. There was just a lot of celebration. And I think that was, like you said, that didn't help the negative image of it. And another thing that I've heard people that were actually a part of the 60s and Haight Ashbury and all that, was the thing that they got wrong was their exclusion. That it was when you exclude anyone, you make it an us versus them. And it was, well, either you're a hippie or you're a straight edge. And there was this hard line, and it's less about making an us and them and more about, at least in my opinion, more about making us into them or them into us, vice versa.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Ken Kesey's line was, you're either on the bus or you're off the bus. So you're right. That was, how they felt. And I think that's the difference. Well, there's two differences. One is that I feel that the whole, Summer of Love San Francisco scene, it was way too idealistic, and I think the new wave is more realistic. And that's my whole goal with what I'm doing and what it sounds like you're doing is that you just want to find the others that are out there, but it's to help us not escape the rest of the world. It's to help us just find an identity so we don't feel like we're outcasts, and we know how to get along in the rest of our life, how we go to work, and whatever, and raise our children and do everything else with all the other people that not only aren't others, but aren't ever going to be others,
Yeah, definitely. It's finding the others isn't like it's not a matter of find the others so we can all uprise, and it's not that. It's just it's a community thing. It's something that it's a rising tide of. I mean, times are changing. The fact that psilocybin just got breakthrough therapy status is massive, and I want someone to talk about that too. But the problem is that there's still that taboo involved with it. And if you want something to stop being taboo, I believe you need to treat it like it's not taboo. Like you need to take that taboo away and speak about it openly, be able to speak about psychedelics, be able to speak about sex, the thing literally all of us do. Like I think there is a matter of opening up the door behind it. And I think finding the others just allows you to have that outlet and not plot something about how our protest and our all of this. It's just to have a discussion, to know that the others are out there.
Yeah. No, I really think, you know, the more, and that's why YouTube's so great for as many, you know, nonsense videos as there are on there. It's creating that the next generation is totally going to be okay talking about psychedelics. It's much like how we've seen the evolution of cannabis in this country. You know, 20 years ago, you know, you couldn't really mention, you couldn't wear a shirt with a pot leaf on it, or you'd get, you know, kicked out of stores and stuff like that. And now we've gotten to where it's legal in more states than it isn't. I think we're going to see that, especially with mushrooms. We're going to see that in 20 years. I imagine mushrooms are going to kind of be like how cannabis is now.
Yeah, I absolutely see that. And not only do I see that happening, I think it's going to happen exponentially faster than it did for marijuana. Marijuana has been creeping in for a very long time, and it took a long time to get that ball rolling. And I think it's going to happen much quicker with psychedelics, especially with the evidence coming out of like Johns Hopkins and NYU as far as treating PTSD, depression, anxiety, all of it. Like there's no denying that, like there's no denying, at least that right now, that it's scheduled completely wrong. Like the fact that it's high risk for harm and addiction, like that's just not the case at all. And there's enough evidence now to be concrete on that.
Yeah, I mean, it's the one area where I do agree that cannabis is a gateway drug is that it's a gateway to society really reevaluating what our rights should and shouldn't be to what we do with our body and our mind. You know, that it's I think you said earlier when we were talking that it's a human rights issue when it comes to you know, drug policy, and I think cannabis kicked that door down and forced our society to have that discussion. And
yes.
And so I do agree, not only just with the speed of how everything happens and information spreads with the internet now, but just that as far as, you know, the work we have to do with psychedelics, like cannabis has already done all the hard work. You know, it's done all the heavy lifting already.
Yeah, definitely. And that was something that Terrence McKenna said, was that no government has ever given the people more rights than they have demanded. Yeah. And that's kind of what happened with cannabis. Is, I mean, there's children having epileptic seizures, and like their parents looking at jail time for treating them with a plant. And that's why I believe in making this a human's rights issue. It's and I mean, there are so many different angles to come at it from, but for me personally, I used it like it literally saved my life and cured my depression. And it's absolutely a human rights issue. That, I mean, I live in the Northwest. They grow within, I don't know, a mile of you at any given moment. There's probably some around. And I mean, within 100 yards of you there, you can find mushrooms during the right time of the year. And to say that if I was to pick one of those up off the ground and it happens to be the wrong one, that's a crime. Never mind that it actually is helping me in some like massive way. I just think that's ridiculous. And that's where it needs to become a human rights issue. And why I think the human rights argument is one of the most powerful, as far as, I mean, you can argue your freedom to do it, your freedom of just all these different things. But when it comes to human rights issues, it kind of becomes well, either I get this or you're literally denying me a right.
Yeah, I think I definitely agree with you. With it, it's going to start spreading like wildfire compared to cannabis, just because not only the technology aspect of YouTube and different platforms where people are getting out the word about their experience, but the curing fashion of it, where it can cure different ailments. But on top of that, even for people that might not associate themselves with a disease or depression or anxiety or something that it could cure, it is the ultimate experience. And humans yearn, something that powerful.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
So I think that alone, will be something that humans will associate with and want to try and see the good in it right off the bat after the first attempt.
Yeah, definitely. I can see that in I mean, if nothing else, it's almost to the point already where, well, no, I guess it's not quite that far yet, but I can see it getting to the point where it's everyone knows someone that like psychedelics have touched their life in some way, that their grandmother was dying of cancer and they gave them to him, which is actually, I have a friend that did that. His family is full of doctors, and they convinced his grandmother, like as she's basically laying on her deathbed, to take I think she did 4 grams, and she never even touched them, obviously. And she said it was the first time she'd felt the love of God in her entire life.
Yeah.
It's a very powerful thing.
Yeah. No, I think, the treatment resistant depression and the results that are coming out about that we know that depression is such a major problem. And it doesn't just affect the person with the depression, as we see with society and the violence and stuff like that, and all of this, that standard psychiatry is not working, and when people fall through the cracks, it's really bad. And so I think that's going to push policy to relax on alternative therapies and breakthrough therapies, and that's why psilocybin is going to be pushed right along. Because of the need for that. And, the end of life stuff is good too. And we're just behind the curve on that because I'm not sure which country it is, but it's one of the like Scandinavian countries like Norway or Finland. It's part of their healthcare program that you can have end of life LSD therapy. That if you're dying and have a terminal disease, like you can go to a therapist and get an LSD experience much in the same fashion that happens underground here. And so it's already accepted. It's just our American society is sounds like such a bad deal, where it's like, no matter what the medicine is, if the people are dying, what the fuck do you care? What do you care what they do to come to grips with that?
Yeah, if it's helping them and in no way hurting anyone else, what is your problem with it? Because you can round up every single person that's ever done psychedelics, and you're going to find less harm than a group of 1,000 people that have done hydrocodones or any sort of opiates or whatever. And I mean, the statistics of how many people become addicted to those, and it becomes an actual problem for them. Like the risk to reward ratio is just massively off with, specifically with a lot of painkillers and opiates.
Yeah. Did you have some questions about the bus, Stan?
Yeah. Well, I just was wondering, like, the process of acquiring it, as well as difficulties along the way, and then if you could get into kind of what you are turning it into, like the interior. I haven't checked out your Instagram yet, but if you could kind of detail if you're trying to create, more of a forum type space so that you can have open discussion, or a home type space. What are you trying to do with that?
Yeah, no problem. As far as what I'm turning into it's definitely 100% going to be a home. The whole reason we got it was so that me and my wife could quit our jobs and just travel the country. And it's something that doesn't seem like you should wait till you're 60 years old and hope that you get to do it. It seems like I want to do this now and see where it takes me. So yeah, its relation to the psychedelics group only came later. It wasn't quite like I made it as a traveling lounge to have these discussions, but I'm not opposed to that either, going wherever we end up traveling, or who knows what'll happen. Telling people, hey, this is where we are. If you'd like to come have a discussion, we'll gladly meet up on this date or whatever. But as far as acquiring it, It's easier than buying a car, really. So when I first decided that we were going to get it, we didn't have like any money in savings. I mean, this wasn't. I decided I was going to make it happen, and I did. And so every day on my lunch breaks, I would go to a bank and I would ask for a loan, and I was asking for $15,000 because you can get. I mean, what an $80,000 RV, you can get that for 15 to 20,000 in a bus, and it's going to be better in every way. I mean, it'll last longer. It's just they're better. And no banks would give me the money, and I just kept trying and kept trying, and finally I found a bank that said, "Look, we're not going to give you the money we can't give you the 15 grand. We could give you 5." And I said, "All right, I guess I'm building it myself." So I said, all right, I'm going to go out and see what I can find for that. And I had been shopping around, and I thought I'd still be a little short and stuff. But I just kept looking around and looking around. And one day it hit me. I messaged a buddy, and I was like, well, I need someone to ask questions about, like, basically, do you know any diesel mechanics? Because I can work on cars all day, but I don't know what to do with the engine that smokes anyways, like it's supposed to do that. So he goes, well, actually, I have a buddy that owns a bus company. And he happened to own a charter company, and that's who we bought the bus from. When I started looking, it was the first bus I had looked at, and I passed on it, and I was like, I'll keep looking, I'll find something else. And then like a month later, I came back to it, and I was like, no, this is exactly what I want. And we picked it up. I got the entire bus for $4,000. And I mean, seats, it was in service. It was a fully functioning bus. It's an 89, which it's not like the design of them has changed that much. So it's not like old Greyhound you would see in like a Motown movie or something like that. It's an 89. It's the year before they went to electronic ignition and all that. And it's all just relays and switches. And that's what I wanted. I wanted to keep it simple so I can always work on it. And I went and bought the bus. I drove it home, took down a fence, and literally just parked it in the garden. And I'm in a house that I'm renting. I never even spoke with the landlord. And when they showed up and saw it, they just wanted to go ask questions about it and go on it and see it. They absolutely loved it. There was licensing wasn't an issue. It's different for every state. Here, they kept saying that I had to jump through all these hoops to do it, but I was finding information online that said otherwise. But if you can't convince the person at the DMV or the DOL that they're wrong, there's nothing you can do. So I just kept trying, and I finally found a lady on the other side of the state that knew what she was doing. And she's like, yeah, nobody over there seems to know what they're doing. They're 2 buttons away from what you want to do. And I was like, okay, how do I get this licensed as just a motorhome? And she's like, well, you send me a check for $140 and I send you license plates. And that was it. You don't need a CDL, at least in my state. I'm in Washington, so I don't know about others, but you don't need a CDL. It's just licensed as a motorhome. Slowly building it up now. We're working on insulating it now. Already have the wood stove in there and just been enjoying that, and got some furniture on it just temporarily just to hang out in. And yeah, it's been a great experience.
That's awesome, man. Yeah, it's an idea that my girlfriend and I actually have been flirting with recently. And the red flags, I guess, would be gas money, where to park while we're working on it, since I'm in like major metropolitan area. And then also, just what type to get. I have to educate myself more on the topic, but I'm trying to.
I can definitely help you with that.
Yeah, definitely. And I'm trying to see like pros and cons between, whether to get, a shorter church style bus or like you said, you have a Greyhound, something longer like that. But the biggest red flag by far was gas money. And I definitely wanted to ask you about that. Is that a major issue, or is the majority of it you're parking somewhere and you're walking around?
Oh yeah, no, there's no way around it. It costs a ton in gas, especially for this bus. So as far as the factors that you were saying going into them, it's so the parking issue that's definitely something you'd have to figure out. You could always most storage units have like an empty lot, and they just allow store RVs and stuff there. You could do that. I don't know what their rules are on building stuff. As far as picking the kind of bus, mine was pretty simple. I wanted a bus I could stand up in, and I'm 6'5", and that only left Greyhound buses.
So, I'm 6'5" too.
Oh yeah, well there if you want to stand up in it, there you either have to get a Greyhound bus, or another great idea is just a regular school bus, and you can do a roof raise on them, which is relatively easy if you can get anyone that can weld. It's pretty easy to do. I didn't want to do that, and with Greyhound buses, you have just endless storage underneath all those bays, and school buses don't have that. The trade-off being significantly less ground clearance. The Greyhound bus, if you see them, they're kind of like a lowrider, like they're maybe a foot off the ground. And if you look at a school bus, they're super high off the ground. So you can go, and they're also not air suspension, so they can handle more if you want to go a little off-roading, if you want to go up a trail or something like that. And then the length of them, that's just completely up to you. I knew I wanted as much room as possible. So I just so we never felt cramped. And if later we want to build a short bus, we can do that too and have options. But yeah, it just was a matter of just, I guess, deciding to do it. And like you'd also mentioned about the gas and how bad that is. And like we took a trip to Oregon. It was 13 hours each way of driving, and it was total in gas. We spent $650. But if you counter that and realize, so we only stayed there for 2 days, but let's say we were going to go on for a whole week. You're going to take a vacation there. You would spend that $650, if not more, in a hotel, in eating out, stuff like that. And I mean, we spend that $650 in gas, and that's our new home. We have our house, we have our dogs, we have everything there. And it's absolutely worth it. And when you factor in, you're not paying a mortgage, you're not paying electricity, you're not paying a water bill, you're not paying sewer, garbage, all of that stuff. It definitely offsets it with the gas. And the plan, once we're actually on it full time and living on it and out of the house, will be it's not so much like you're driving every day. I mean, we might have bouts where we want to do that, but really it's going to be go to a town and explore it for a week or so and then move on to somewhere else.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. What how much total do you think after redesign and rebuild do you think you'll spend minus the $4,000 that it put you?
I figure, I haven't really sat down and figured out the entire budget and everything, but yeah. I figure with the most expensive part being the generator, really.
Yeah.
And maybe probably the generator. I would say it'll probably be around $10,000.
Gotcha.
To really do it. But I mean, this is how I'm choosing to do it. You can absolutely choose it to do it your own way on your own budget. And when I say it's going to cost $10,000, I don't have $10,000 to put into it right now. I'm just doing it as I can.
Mm-hmm.
And so save up some money and take your tax returns, go buy a little short bus, whatever you want to do with that. And then just build it as you can. I know I'm a total techie geek, so I'm going to have as many solar panels on it as I can put, as much battery storage as I can, and a good sized generator to run any sort of AC or anything like that. But really beyond those expenses, it's just going to be framing up everything. I mean, water tanks, some plumbing. We're going to have a composting toilet on there. And then really you just kind of build it with things so you can have a very specific idea of what you want. And that's going to cost you kind of a lot of money because you have to go find that specific thing you want. A cheaper way to do it is to find things that you need. Like, oh, I need a sink and here's one on Craigslist or whatever. And then build your bus to suit those things. And that'll save you a ton of money.
Gotcha. And then what, if you don't mind me asking, what is income like on the bus life? I personally work remotely and have my own business doing like web design and just digital media solutions. So that's probably not a problem on my end, but I was wondering for your case, what do you end up doing?
So as of right now, we're not actually on it full time. We still have our house, but we're working towards that. The first step towards that was my wife leaving her job of like 8.5 years. And she was miserable there. She needed a new job. It was time for her to leave. And I said, okay, well, you can either go get a good job or you can make a good job. And you can't have a 9 to 5 if we're going to be living on a bus and traveling. So this should be our next leap of faith. Let's force ourselves to give up a good portion of our income. And you go do whatever you think is going to make you happy and, the career, whatever you want. And what that ended up being was, eBay reselling. I'd had I had started I've been a graphic designer for years, and I had started selling decals on there. And all I would do is go on eBay, look at the sold items and look for the best selling decal, and then I would copy that exact one and sell it for 50 cents cheaper. And I just started doing that, and then that became us going to yard sales on the weekend, and just you're looking at a table full of stuff and just start looking up things and seeing what they're worth. And oh, they want $2 for this coffee maker that sells for $55 on eBay. Okay, well, I'll buy that. And then and now we're slowly getting into drop shipping. But yeah, and then I'm an inventor on top of, like, outside of my 9-to-5 job. So I've got an invention in stores right now that I'm working on growing some more, and it's kind of on a hold right now. But yeah, it's not as specific. You have to do this. You have to do this. At the end of the day, just decide this is what you want. Anything that you want out of life, just decide this is what's going to happen. Like, I am going to be a movie maker. I've never made a movie, but I'm a movie maker now. Even though I haven't made one, everything from this point in my life is leading towards me making that first one and then the second and from there on. But every movie maker has had the point where before he made his first movie, but he was still a movie maker then. And that's what I'm saying is just decide what you're going to do and stop. Don't look at anything that gets in your way as a threat to as a threat to your dream. It's just an obstacle that you have to overcome. And it's just, all right, well, how am I going to get past this? Okay, well, how am I going to get past this one now? And that's all it is. So the one hurdle we keep having to jump over is money, but the hurdles are getting smaller and smaller, and we're slowly figuring out what we need to be doing and how to do it. And that's just it. But just whatever it is, like, we were terrible with money, and just whatever you want to do, keep sucking at it, because that's how you get good, is just keep sucking at it until you stop sucking at it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, personally, the psychedelic insight has shown me that plenty of times with what I want to do in my life, just this is who you are. So go and do it,
Yeah. And that's really hard that's something that's really hard to reconcile kind of with psychedelics, is wanting to leave society, wanting to give up the material lifestyle, and also at the same time realizing you need money to do that.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's, and I mean, in my 9-to-5 job, I'm a jewelry designer, and there's no, like, I see the hypocrisy in that, but it's a job I fell into. I was working for a jewelry store, working on their camera system electronics, and they find out I was a graphic designer, and they were like, "Hey, would you like to learn CAD?" And me learning it was me watching YouTube videos for about 2 weeks, and then I just started doing it, and I just kind of fell into it. But so I fully understand, like, there's a juxtaposition there, and you kind of have to accept it for what it is. And it's like anything else in life. Either you can do something about it and you need to do that thing, or you can't do anything about it and you need to accept it. And I know I can do something about this, but for right now, I'm happy where I am, as far as it's the only job I can imagine where I work for someone else and I'm happy because of the amount of freedom that this job gives me.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So, but it does also, like, I'll work with some customers that are just the epitome of material capitalism and just need the more stones and bigger and more and bigger. And at the end of the day, you just got to do it. But yeah, it's a means to an end. It's by no means something I was going towards.
Yeah. And I mean, if you prioritize your happiness, and that's just a stop along the way, it's nothing to it.
Yeah. And this job brings me happiness because it's a family run business, and the family is just, they're some of the greatest people I've ever met. So that's really what keeps me there. Cause I've had other jobs where I just worked for someone else, and it was just a job, and I never once was happy at them. I couldn't keep them for very long. I was just absolutely miserable. And this is the first one that I absolutely love the job, even if I don't necessarily enjoy the societal impacts of it and what it's saying. I'm able to look beyond that, I guess.
Yeah. And I mean, that's extremely hard to find, I think. And people people can overlook that when they're paid a good check. They can definitely turn a blind eye to their own wellness in the workplace. And I mean, I've actually was just talking to Ruben about this the other day, and I'm in the same situation where I'm just trying to get my own business started up here, so I don't have to work for anyone except myself. And because all the effort and all the attempt that I have tried in the past to work for somebody else or another business has just fallen apart. And I think it just ultimately comes down to, me either thinking my time is more valuable than what they're paying me, or me knowing that I'm just working for somebody else's dream, and I should be working towards mine.
Yeah, you got to have a plan, or you'll become a part of someone else's plan.
Yeah, true.
I mean, that's really what it is. And I definitely get that. And for me, it was the idea of when you're working for someone else, without fail, I'll see something being done a certain way, and I know it can be done better. I'd like to see it done better, but I still have to do it the crappy way because this other guy gets to dictate what happens simply because he was here a couple years before me. Never mind that I know this thing better. Like, this clearly would make sense in a whole other way. And I just like not having the freedom to go, okay, this could be done better. Let's do that. Like, just to see the same horrible mistakes get made over and over and just the wheels spinning. And just, I need to have some level of, I guess, control over my own, path and what's going on. And that's why I have this job, is it makes me happy. Like, the worst part of my day is getting ready for work, because I hate doing that. And the best part of my day is actually when I get to work, because of the people I see and how much I enjoy my job, which is, I never thought I'd be the guy that would be happy working for someone else.
Yeah. Well, I mean, like I said, that's awesome though. I mean, there's, I have a ton of friends. I'm just a few years out of college. So I have a couple of friends that are just chasing the money and, are scared to go outside of their degree, as if that's their only route that they can take. And, they're just phoning it in 9 to 5 or, even 7 to 6 at a warehouse, and drink themselves till they fall asleep after hours, just because they got the money to do it. And it's just an endless cycle. And unless and they are psychedelic users. They've used psychedelics in the past, and they just failed to accept what it was teaching them, to the point now that whenever I bring it up around them, they're frightened. They're just like, I don't even know how you do that anymore, man. Like, I'd be too scared. Like, the last time I did it spooked me. And it's just like, well, maybe you just weren't listening. You weren't willing to learn. You're just stuck in the old ways.
Yeah, it presents you with a path, and you can definitely choose to not take that path.
Yeah.
But I can't imagine doing something just for the money, or to be afraid to go out of my wheelhouse. I mean, everything good in life, it happens outside your comfort zone. That's why it feels so good when it happens, is because it's out of your comfort zone. And to do any job just for the money, okay, I'll give, if you have children, I get that. But to say that if you want to make a major change in your life and you have children, ask yourself this: would it literally be impossible for me to do something I love and be able to support for my family? Like, would that literally be humanly impossible? Because if the answer is no, then it's possible, and just, that's it. Like, go do it. All it takes is the possibility. And the thing I always come back to is when you think about like losing your job or like leaving your job, is, okay, imagine right now you lost your job. Your company folds, you go into work tomorrow, doors are closed, you are out of a job. Are you going to starve to death? Are you going to lose your house and your car and everything you love? Or are you going to find a way? Like, you're going to find a way. And the thing that I always tell myself is, when a bird is sitting on a branch, do you think he worries about that branch breaking? And he doesn't, because he has trust in his wings. And I keep coming back to that. And it took me years to like force that into myself and say, like, no, you can do this. And like, I would have to, for instance, that first trip I told you about when we went to Oregon, I knew that when we made that trip about a month in advance, that was, I knew that when we made that trip about a month in advance, for some reason, as we got closer to the trip, things were going to get harder and harder, and I was going to get tested to see if I was still going to take this trip. And we took the trip. The day we left, the day after, my wife quit her job of 8.5 years. We'd had to buy new batteries for the bus the day before, and those are $250 a piece, and there's 2 of them. We'd had all these extra expenses come up, and we were like, not only are you leaving your job and we want to take this trip's going to take most of our savings to do it. And we actually backed out of it the day before. The night we were supposed to get packed and get ready, we were like, all right, this isn't going to happen. We just can't do this. And the next day I sat my wife down and I said, look, I just need to get this off my chest. Like I'm hurt that we didn't go. Like, I feel like a failure because this was a test for myself. I wanted to know that we could do this and make it. And we let ourselves get scared. Like, nothing's physically stopping us. We're just scared because of where money's at. And I feel like we could not go and we could just have our money, or we could go down this road and like, we could dig a hole for ourselves, and us getting out of that hole will teach us that we can make it through anything, and we'll never be afraid to take this bus anywhere. Like, when we're on the road and we don't have money, if something comes up and we're low on money, we don't have the option of not taking the trip because our life is the trip. And during that conversation, she said, you're right, let's go. And we just up the instant, we left late. We didn't get there till 5 a.m. It was pitch black. Like, it was just, but we did it. And it took a bunch of our savings, and it was scary for a few weeks. But now I know that if I was to go back to that exact same situation again, I'm not going to feel that way because I know I can make it through it. And I know what my wings are capable of. And once you have that, the fear of not having money, not having any of this, it goes away because you're like, no, I know at the end of the day, I'm going to make it because it's up to me and no one else.
Mm-hmm. Man, that's powerful.
Yeah. I mean, my life's been a similar thing with last year quitting my job to focus on my family. I mean, that's the scariest thing I've ever done in my life, and I definitely, to tie it back into psychedelics, like I don't think I would have made that decision without having rediscovered psychedelics. And like, basically when I stopped doing psychedelics, then I listened to, the voices of security and mm-hmm. doing what society wants you to do. And that's where I went to school and did all that and got married and bought a house and had a kid and all that stuff. And then, I graduated and got a job and was like, this is what I'm supposed to be doing. This is what everyone says you're supposed to be doing. And this is what felt safe. Right. And then after 6 months of doing that, I was like, this sucks. Not the marriage and kid part, but the job, is like, man, like this is what I was supposed to do, but it really isn't enjoyable. And
you have the golden handcuffs.
Right. Exactly. And it wasn't even like I was making that much money, but it was still like, this is what the path was supposed to be. Right. And that's what really led me to rediscover psychedelics and through Terrence McKenna, like we were talking about and everything, but more just, realizing, my prior usage was all for partying and just because I had nothing better to do almost, and then to really start taking them with an intention of following some sort of destiny or fate, and finding a spiritual purpose or whatever. I started to grow as a person and started to, still feel the fear of taking a leap of faith, but to not be as afraid of it, I guess, and the psychedelic experience itself and the culture is just riddled with that lesson of embracing fear. The old Terrence McKenna line of that we've mentioned on most of the podcast, I think, but of, hurl yourself into the abyss just to find out that it's a feather bed. And that's such an important lesson, not just during the experience, but I think it's one of the lessons that you can, get that's beneficial to your life outside of a psychedelic experience too. And, I think, not just us three, but I imagine a lot of people listening as well, have found themselves taking that leap of faith and doing something, whether it's buying a bus, whether it's becoming a stay-at-home dad, whether it's starting your own company, whatever. I wonder if, you know, if it wasn't for our psychedelic experiences, if we would have been able to face that fear, you know?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely one thing that you learn, though. It's not like right out of the book, right out of college, or right after I realized I didn't want to work in my first job or the second or the third job. It wasn't then that I learned that, you know. It was until that one moment, particularly for me, it was actually leaving everything and moving out to Colorado. I had these plans to move out to Colorado with my best friend. And it was that one moment when I waited to the last second and I said no. And it was that moment that taught me you can't be doing that anymore. You can't let, you know, all the thoughts that rush into your head and the reasons no to stop you.
Yeah.
You know? And 100% I'll give credit to psychedelics for helping me digest and understand that. And now, I mean, I'm still, you know, near my hometown. I do have plans to go out to the states that I want to live and visit and all that. But most importantly, the biggest stressor in my life and was my decision to say no in that instance was finances. And right now I have no income but my own business. And, you know, there's times when money's tight, but if you trust in the universe and you trust in yourself, you know, and those are two extremely valuable lessons that I learned from mushrooms specifically. You know, once you do those two things, you realize, you know, basically you can conquer anything. You know, it's powerful stuff.
Yeah. You're really only as powerful and only as weak as you think you are. Like I was just telling someone the other day, like the only thing wrong with any of us is that we think there's something wrong with us. Like, you'll be surprised how just when you're like, oh, how much of your abilities are just psychological and how much of your flaws and how much you can get past by just deciding you can do it. Like, that's really all it is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, something that Ruben touched on right there was the design path that is put forth and, you know, kind of embedded in our mind ever since a young age and through media and through what our parents are telling us and family and all that, which is what he went through, you know, which is school, you know, post high school, university, you know, get a good job, get married, have kids. And you can
all of our societal programming.
Exactly. And you can do all that and you can do it as fast or as slow as you want. But at the end of that, you're always going to be asking what's next. And that is when you have to face yourself, because the path isn't going to be set out for you. It's going to be something that you set forth. And you know, I never was told as a kid, I heard you could be whatever you want and the cliche statements that you're told, but you don't believe it and you don't let it affect you, you know, and you're just like, all right, yeah, I get I can be Michael Jordan, but, you know, I'm stuck going and getting a marketing degree. So, you know, Michael Jordan didn't do that. So you're like, all right, so I'm going to go get this job. I'm going to get this money and then I'm going to have kids, you know, and the family will bring me the happiness. And sure, it'll bring you that happiness, but, you know, it's not until for me at least, and for people that I surround myself with, it's not until you really understand your passion and what your, I guess you could say, calling is, or what you believe your calling is, until you get that eternal happiness, you know? Yeah.
It's a matter of kind of just, I guess, following or finding your own path. And I guess what it came down to me was like realizing that you are everything you've ever wanted. Like you already are it. Like you have everything, like that happiness you want to find, it's in there. Like you have and are everything you ever wanted or needed. You just haven't realized it yet.
That's funny you bring that up, actually, because one thought that I had, I'd say maybe 2-3 years ago, actually probably a little bit, no, actually 4 or 5 years ago, it was after my first ever trip with mushrooms. And it was probably like a few months after that. And you know how your brain just starts working after that, and it brings in new thoughts you never thought before. And this whole time, or this whole the before the trip, I was always yearning to be somebody else, and yearning to I have a passion in music, so it was always like, all right, well, I want to be this musician. I want to wear these clothes, or like, have the style or whatever. And then at that one moment, all of a sudden I realized, I think I was probably like 22 or something. And I was like, wow, this is the moment you realize you are that person that you wanted to be right now. So like, it just, boom, everything changes. And then it's just like, all right, well, get going,
Yeah, and the crazy thing is I'd never thought of that, but that was absolutely me to a T. I always grew up. I had someone I was looking up to, somebody I wanted to be able. It was somebody I actually knew, or someone I just idolized, and they were who I wanted to be. That's who I'm going to become, and it never worked out. I never became that person. My personality and who I am is pieces from all those people that I've picked up along the way, but yeah, I never really realized that that's what psychedelics did for me. There was a time growing up when my entire childhood, basically, I hated that I didn't fit in. I was 2 feet taller than everyone else. I'm mixed, which means that everyone white sees me as the giant black guy, and everyone black sees me as, I don't really know, but you're not black. And so I never really fit in anywhere. And I ran amongst all of the groups. I ran on like the fringes of all of the groups. And I used to hate that. I used to just want to be Mexican or black, or just have some group to I really identify with. And then when I started doing psychedelics, I realized how much of a blessing it is to not fit in, because I'm not beholden to anyone to be the good Catholic boy, to be anything. Nobody expects me to be the stereotypical this or the stereotypical that. I just get to I don't have all of these cultural assumptions that I have to shed and let go of. I really got to just got to realize oh, I'm kind of a blank slate, and I can just be whoever I want, as weird as I want. And I really learned to love and embrace that, just to be a unique person, which is so rare anymore.
Definitely is, being a true individual and having original thoughts and all that is not so common.
That's been a big benefit for me, that I've found with microdosing, is that even though I'm on a sub-perceptual dose, that I'm not tripping, I'm not even really high, it's there. I know it's there, but I'm going about my day. My day consists of hanging out with soccer moms and other stay at home parents and stuff like that, or going to the store or the gym or all of these things that is just very much, you could definitely feel like you're just part of the dull gray masses going through that. But even just that, knowing but I'm on a microdose of LSD, and they're not, it gives you your own little, unique moment, your unique day, even if I'm just going through the motions, just knowing that my head's in a little different space than everyone else, is kind of refreshing, and I think it helps fulfill that need to be unique, even if my responsibilities don't allow me to be that unique,
No, definitely. And that last part is so true, is if you feel that way, then you're going to be that way. And if you feel like you're uniquely creative in the day, or if you feel like you're separate from this group, you're going to be that way, and you're going to excel in whatever you're trying to do. Whenever I microdose, and I think recently I was doing a graphic design project. I think I was making some album cover artwork for a friend. He gives me the information, I digest it, and with that little special force inside my mind saying, hey, you're going to make something special, voila, I'm going to spend 4 or 5 hours on it, more than I would ever spend, not on a microdose, and it's going to be something special because I'm feeling that way. And it's great stuff, man. I took a break and then I hopped back into it, and I think I just recently started realizing all the true benefits because I kind of took it for granted, or I was mixing it with other substances, and now I'm just doing it purely with that and using it only when I want to use it, not even on a schedule or anything. And it's provided me with brand new insights, and it's great.
Yeah, I've kind of backed off the schedule too. I've kind of just started, like you said, if I was like had something going on and be like, that'd be a good thing to microdose for, I've started kind of doing that too.
So that was actually what I wanted to ask you guys, is what your schedules were. Is when I microdose, the schedule I've heard of that's most common is you'll take a small amount for 1 week and then double it the next week and then a week off. And when I was doing it, I was basically just doing like 0.2 to 0.4 a day, and just in the morning. And I would actually I would have it ground up and just mix it into my tea and drink that down every morning. And so did you guys have a schedule, or what does your regimen look like now?
Well, so I don't know if you've read, what's it called? Well, Dr. James Fadiman is the author. I think the book is the Psychedelic Explorer's Guide. It's over on my shelf. I can't see it, but he talks about it, and then he has a website where he is actually doing kind of like an anecdotal research gathering, where he has like a form you can fill out and send back to him, and he's just compiling all the data from people. But so his guideline is 1 day on and 2 days off, and then just continuing that cycle. And to do that, I think he says for 9 weeks. I'd have to look it up again, but I believe that he suggests it be done with LSD. And that's what I've been doing currently. But like last year and maybe a year before that, when I first like kind of heard about microdosing, I was doing it with mushrooms. But I was taking much less than you were taking. I find that anything over like 0.1 is almost too much for me. And I also found, I would grind all the mushrooms up, caps and stems and everything, into just, a homogeneous mixture. And then weigh it out in caps, or in capsules. And I would find, even with weighing it exact every time, that some days it would be perfect, some days I wouldn't feel it, and some days it would be too much, that it just wasn't consistent. But I've found with the LSD that it's super consistent. Especially I do the volumetric method, so it's all diluted in distilled water, and I'm just taking a certain, I take 15 or 1.5 milliliters, and that's the microdose. If people only have access to mushrooms, they can accomplish a lot of the same things for a microdosing regimen. But that's just the only thing I found, that just the potency and everything is just it's not as consistent. So I think microdosing mushrooms lends itself more to what Stan and I were just talking about picking and choosing what days are going to be a microdose day. Then I think that would be really good. But if you're trying to stick to a straight up regimen, I think having that consistency is probably more important, and I think that's easier with LSD. But I think people could do whatever. But as far as like the dosages you were saying, like if I take 0.4 or 0.5 grams, like I'm not getting anything done that day. I'm going to be sitting down listening to Pink Floyd. I'm not going to trip, but I mean, it's not. That's like maybe like a concert dose for me, to where I'm not going to freak out in a crowd, but enjoy the lights and music and stuff like that. But I'm really sensitive to it, and I'm a big guy too. But
I'm the opposite.
Yeah,
I have a weird tolerance.
Yeah. And, I think that's part of the problem I have, and why I like having this, this podcast method of discussing psychedelics is that everyone seems to my one video about 5 dried grams. Everyone, well, not everyone, but a certain percentage of the psychedelic community doesn't even watch the video and just pops in the comment section to say 5 grams isn't that much, and it's like, first off, it's a terrible avenue to discuss that in YouTube comments, but also, like, everybody's different. It doesn't matter size and stuff like that. Like, it has to do with your brain chemistry, and like, you can say it's as spiritual as you want, that the mushroom is going to give you the experience you're going to get, and whatever. That's great. I do believe that, but you can't disregard the brain chemistry. And it doesn't matter how big I am. My brain is sensitive to tryptamines, and so even like, my friends have tried microdosing, and they're the same way. They take like 0.3, 0.4 and stuff like that, and so they, like, I remember this one day at work where they my buddy had weighed out 0.3 grams for everyone, and we all microdosed at work, and everyone else was like just having a good microdose day, and I was like, I got to get out of this car and, like, walk around. Like, I was like, had like an anxious come up almost. I didn't trip, but I mean, it just wasn't a work level of a work appropriate level of a psilocybin experience. And, I don't know what that is. And that's why, like, I'm never going to, like, rip on someone for the dosages they do, because, like, that's part of what you got to do, is just find out what works for you,
Yeah. No, that's, everyone's different. And like I said, I'm a giant. So I feel like if 5 grams is the heroic dose for everyone else, I feel like I'm kind of cheating, because I would be more like 7 or something like that. But And I mean, it's different for everyone in every circumstance. And I mean, even on a daily basis, depending on how your neurology is. And it's like Terrence McKenna said, and why he said so much about singing when if you're having that anxiety on the come up, is because it might have one claw in heaven, but it has the other one in your neurology. And it's only going to work as well as your brain works. And I don't I don't know if either of you guys have had this experience or done this, but I have absolutely applied singing to having a difficult, bad trip, and singing or humming or just any of it. And what it is, I mean, really what it is, it's a psychological trick to get you to control your breathing. And it gets you to constantly, like, control your breathing in and out and oxygenate your brain. And that's really what it's doing, is it's getting all the oxygen to your brain. And I mean, it'll bring you out of that bad trip and make you feel so much better. And I mean, it's rooted in your neurology.
Yeah.
Yeah. I actually had a humming experience myself too. Dark trip. I think about maybe hour 15, hour and a half in, and my buddy actually recommended it to me before I tried to do it in silent darkness and everything. And I just kept it noted in my mind, and it was dark, nothing crazy like dark visuals or anything like that, but it was just, a bad headspace, and started humming, and then it was crazy. It actually tricked me. It turned my thoughts into, like, remembering when I was a child, and, like, having my mother hum to me, and then all that from that point on, it's great. So I never actually thought about the breathing impact of it. And that's awesome that you brought that up, because I never knew, what was actually occurring, what made it, what made my thoughts slow down, and bringing on good thoughts instead of bad thoughts. And I definitely could see the breathing being the key to that.
I think too that there's something to the vibrational nature, because your brain is opened up to all sorts of energies that you normally ignore, and that's why music touches, I mean, it spans all languages, right? And it's the vibrational nature. And I think this is something that, the more traditional ceremonies using mushrooms and ayahuasca and stuff like that, they had already figured that out, because what goes on in an ayahuasca ceremony and in a Mexican mushroom ceremony, the shaman sits there and sings, and everyone kind of gets tuned into that same vibration, and it keeps everything focused. It's almost a distraction from the negative thought loops that you could get, because that's what the anxiety is you're like, oh, no, and you're compounding negative emotions on top of it. And
that's how you go bad so quick.
Yeah. And to be able to tune into a different vibration distracts you from that thought loop. I have not tried it, and I need to. Like to do the humming and singing. I would actually like to learn a couple like traditional, I think they're called Icaros or whatever.
Yeah, Icaros.
The chants that shamans use, or maybe I haven't even looked if they have them on Spotify just to listen to, but we look at the cultures that use mushrooms before Western society discovered them, and they had already figured out a lot of the stuff that we're starting to to realize.
Oh yeah,
I was reading LSD, My Problem Child, that Albert Hoffman that discovered LSD, that he wrote, and I didn't know that after LSD became, all this research drug, I didn't know that he went to Mexico with R. Gordon Wasson, who is the guy that, wrote the first article about magic mushrooms, that he went, and because he had been making synthesized psilocybin. He's the one that actually named or came up with the name for psilocybin, and found that as the alkaloid, or the main psilocin and psilocybin. He discovered both of those from samples that R. Gordon Wasson sent him. And then so R. Gordon Wasson said, well, I'm going to take you to the shaman in Mexico that I found these mushrooms from. So and so he went, and they found out that after the shaman had given R. Gordon Wasson the mushrooms, and then he wrote about it, and white people started coming down and looking for mushrooms, that the traditional culture kind of blacklisted this shaman, Maria Sabina, and burnt her house, because they were a cultural rite of passage, and it wasn't supposed to be shared with the people,
outsiders,
right? And so it's pretty interesting, because our society probably wouldn't know much about traditional uses of mushrooms and the ceremonies and stuff that go along with it if it wasn't for her reaching out and R. Gordon Wasson was this he was a titan of industry. I can't remember. He worked for some, huge financial corporation, but he just traveling and exploring other cultures. And if she wouldn't have reached out and let him have this ceremony and kind of reached across the aisle, if you will, it's possible that we wouldn't have that experience now, that it would still be, a kept secret in Mexico.
Yeah, there's going back to the humming thing and the shamanistic, tones and all that. There's a virtual reality software. I don't know if you've tried it or if you have access to virtual reality, but it's called Sound Self, I want to say. And it is just, you're in total darkness until you start using your voice, and it starts painting this picture from your voice. If you pair that with a psychedelic, or even something minor such as an edible, or just smoke a little bit beforehand, I'm sure you could have equally powerful experiences just with your voice,
Oh
yeah. And that's even Terrence McKenna talked about that on his DMT trips, about language that can be beheld, where the self-transforming machine elves were in the bouncing jeweled basketballs were telling him, do as we do. And they were making things with language. And that's interesting that somebody's actually made that into a VR program, I guess. VR is definitely something I think goes, I think in the future it's going to go hand in hand with psychedelics. I think I think both are going to be incredibly transformative in the future. I think VR is going to change the world in the same way that the smartphone did. Yeah, I think it's going to absolutely revolutionize everything, but we've still got a little ways to go with it. But there's some amazing applications with it and stuff. And the things I've played with are being able to paint in 3 dimensions with paints that are, I mean, animated paints. I don't know how else to explain it. Like, it's just ridiculous the things you can do with them. And yeah, I'm glad to see that they're already crossing over. And I have heard stories of people. There was a guy on Reddit saying he had used, I don't remember which psychedelic, but he was using psychedelics while doing VR. And then when he took the VR headset off, it took him a while to realize, to like feel like he wasn't still in a simulation. Like, he felt like he'd seen the simulation that is reality, which, if you're into simulation theory at all, is a fascinating concept in itself, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that it's so easy to get lost in whatever application you're using. I mean, I even tried like just Netflix on it, and you're like in a cabin with a fireplace going and your headphones on, and all of a sudden you take it off and you're like, wait, where was I for a second there, you know?
Yeah, it's incredibly immersive. And
yeah,
that I feel like it'll also help us challenge just the nature of society and reality as a whole. Like, when it becomes, when we have the neural link with it, and you're able to actually see, feel, and hear and smell everything in a virtual environment. Like, let's say you're in a virtual environment and you walk and you trip over a rock, you stub your toe on the couch or something in the virtual environment, but you physically feel that pain. Like, it's really there and you can feel it. Is that real? Because, I mean, that's kind of how we judge things as being real now, is if you can see it and feel it and touch it. And at what point, when you're in that virtual world, like when you were sitting there and you're in that cabin, but imagine you could smell the wood and you can feel the heat from the fire. And I was to ask you, where are you? Are you in that cabin? Are you on the couch at home where you've got the VR headset? Like, where are you really? And that kind of allows you to just question the entire nature of reality itself.
Yeah. Well, and I'll even take it a step further as far as like where we're going with technology is, what about when you add AI into that, to where you're not,
You have the Matrix.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you have full simulation there. If not only if it's where it fools your physical senses, but if it also adapts to your thoughts, and the program is not just watching a fire in a cabin, but if you're afraid of something of coming in, and it senses that, or whatever, like, I mean,
if you or anyone else wants to get a really good sense for what that's going to be like, go on Netflix, watch the show Black Mirror. There's an episode called Playtest, and it's basically a simulation. Like, there's throughout it, you'll see mushroom imagery on the wall, and it's the device is literally called the mushroom. Like, it's very much basically a horrific psychedelic trip, like a metaphor for one, using virtual reality, and where it reads his mind and plays off of his fears. And it's one of the most terrifying pieces of art I've ever seen. Like, I watched that one morning with my wife, and then went out to work on the bus and realized 20 minutes later, I was just sitting on the bus staring out the window, like, thinking about what is reality. Like, it really will give you an idea for what that would be like. So yeah, it's on Black Mirror, and the episode's called Playtest.
Yeah, I've seen that episode, and that's actually one that has formed my view of that in the future, VR, AI, and even designer research chemical psychedelics, I think they will cross a threshold where the three of those put together can totally make simulation theory reality.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Well, it's getting kind of late here, guys, and we've been talking for quite a while. We were talking before we started recording, everyone. So
yeah,
it's it was great talking with you, Tyson. What was your website or email again for the bus group if people want to check that out?
So if anyone wants to know more about our psychedelics group, or you want to start your own and know how I did it and anything about it, you can reach me at theothersspokane@gmail.com. And I'd love to branch out and help anyone else start another others group in your own city and whatever the bus is not a requirement for it. That's just happened to be where I was able to have it. Yeah. And then if you want to follow along with us building the bus and just how that's going and stuff, Othership Adventures on Instagram. And that's really it. I don't have a Facebook. I do have Othership Adventures Facebook page, but I don't think I've ever actually posted on it since I don't have a Facebook. But yeah, you can find us on Instagram, or you can email me and I'll gladly talk with people.
Awesome, man. Yeah. And I definitely, I applaud your leap of faith, and I think your venture is pretty awesome, man. I'm jealous.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Yeah, and we'll put a link for that stuff in the description as well. And for anyone else that wants to come on the podcast, as always, email us at helpfindtheothers@protonmail.com. We've had a lot of responses. We've got a lot of people lined up, but definitely doesn't hurt to get your name on the list. And we're trying to work through it and record as many episodes as we have time to do. And as always, if you don't feel like being a guest for a full podcast, you can call the Google voicemail line that we had on the last or a couple episodes ago, and leave a question or just kind of direct the conversation. And that number is what, Stan?
567-233-1335. 1335. And if you want to text, you can do that as well.
Awesome. So, until next time, we will see you, and thank you for helping find the others.